The truth is stranger than fiction. This story demonstrates that. It's got more twists and turns.
The Natalia Grace case has captivated the public's attention for years, filled with mystery, controversy, and disturbing revelations. It all started when a Ukrainian girl named Natalia Grace was adopted by an American couple, Michael and Christine Barnett, in 2008. At first, Natalia was believed to be a 6-year-old child with a severe form of dwarfism. However, as time passed, shocking details about her age, her background, and the truth of her adoption began to emerge, leaving everyone questioning what really happened in the Barnett household. Was Natalia truly a child in need of a family, or was she a grown woman posing as a child? The twists and turns of this case have led to public outrage, legal battles, and a deep dive into the psychology of both the Barnetts and Natalia herself. In this video, we'll break down the most disturbing aspects of the Natalia Grace case and the complex relationships that unfolded within the Barnett family. The background of Natalia Grace. Natalia Grace's story began in Ukraine, where she was born in 2003. Diagnosed with spondyloepiphyseal dysplasia congenita, SEDC, a rare form of dwarfism, her early life was marked by significant medical challenges. SEDC affects bone growth, causing short stature, joint pain, and skeletal deformities, which would have contributed to her unique physical appearance. In 2008, Natalia's life took a dramatic turn when she was adopted by Michael and Christine Barnett, a couple from Lafayette, Indiana. The Barnetts were told that she was 6 years old, and after undergoing the adoption process, they brought her into their home, believing they were providing a loving environment for a young child in need. However, shortly after the adoption, doubts about Natalia's true age began to surface. Despite the initial paperwork and medical reports, the Barnetts started noticing discrepancies in Natalia's behavior and physical appearance. She appeared to be much older than 6 years old. Natalia's body structure and bone density seemed far more developed for a child of her supposed age. She also exhibited behaviors that were inconsistent with a young child, such as an advanced vocabulary, complex thoughts, and the physical strength of an adult. At first, the Barnetts believed that Natalia might have simply been a late bloomer. However, as time went on, they began to suspect something more alarming. To confirm their suspicions, they took her to medical experts who carried out extensive testing. The results were staggering. Natalia was not a 6-year-old child, but rather an adult woman, likely in her late teens or even early 20s. The medical evaluations pointed to several factors that suggested Natalia was much older than the age she had been presented with. The Barnetts were horrified by this revelation. They had adopted a child under the assumption that they were taking in a young girl, only to discover that they had a grown woman living in their home. They claimed that Natalia had deliberately misrepresented her age, a notion that sparked widespread public interest. According to the Barnetts, Natalia had presented herself as a young child to manipulate the adoption process, hiding her true identity and age in order to secure a family. They argued that she had intentionally deceived them, making it difficult to understand the motivations behind such a calculated act. In response to these unsettling findings, the Barnetts made the decision to cut ties with Natalia. They claimed that she had exhibited increasingly disturbing behaviors, including threatening to harm them and acting out aggressively. Michael and Christine asserted that Natalia was not only older than she had claimed, but also capable of deceit and manipulation, which they believed made living with her increasingly dangerous. Eventually, the Barnetts moved away, leaving Natalia behind. They filed a report stating that she was an adult woman who could take care of herself, believing she had been living in their home under false pretenses. As the case unfolded, it sparked a debate about the ethics of adoption, age deception, and what it means to be a parent. The questions surrounding Natalia's true age and the legitimacy of the Barnetts' claims led to numerous investigations, media coverage, and public outcry. Was Natalia truly a grown adult who had orchestrated an elaborate ruse, or was she a vulnerable individual who had been mistreated and misunderstood? The situation became a highly controversial case, with both sides presenting conflicting stories, leaving many unsure of the truth behind the shocking events. The Barnett's side of the story. The Barnetts maintained that when they first adopted Natalia, they were under the belief that she was a young child. Their primary motivation was to provide her with a loving home and a better life. At the time of the adoption, the Barnetts were led to believe Natalia was 6 years old, and they welcomed her into their family with the intention of giving her a future full of opportunities. However, the Barnett's side of the story took a dramatic turn as they began to notice concerning signs that suggested Natalia was far older than they had been told. As time passed, the Barnetts reported increasingly unsettling behavior from Natalia. They described her as exhibiting violent tendencies, including making threats of physical harm toward them. In some instances, she allegedly expressed a desire to hurt them or cause damage to their property. The Barnetts also claimed that Natalia's behavior was manipulative and deceptive, further fueling their belief that she was not a child, but an adult. They stated that she demonstrated a level of emotional and intellectual sophistication that seemed out of place for a supposed 6-year-old. One of the most significant aspects of the Barnetts' allegations was their claim that Natalia was not, in fact, a child at all. They believed that she had been deliberately posing as a younger girl in order to deceive them. This theory was supported by their discovery that Natalia had a medical condition that caused her physical appearance to resemble that of a child, even though she was much older. This condition, which is linked to her rare form of dwarfism, may have made her look younger than her actual age and helped her convincingly pass as a young child at the time of the adoption. Over time, the Barnetts claimed that the situation became increasingly untenable. They asserted that Natalia's behavior became more erratic and disturbing, leading them to feel unsafe in their own home. The Barnetts described their decision to leave Natalia behind as a difficult and painful one. They believed that they had done everything they could to care for her, but after consulting with professionals and realizing the severity of the situation, they felt they could no longer provide the care that was needed. Ultimately, they moved out of their family home and left Natalia to fend for herself, assuming she was an adult capable of independent living. The Barnetts argued that they had been victims of deception and manipulation, asserting that Natalia had tricked them into adopting her under false pretenses. Their claims sparked public controversy, as they argued that Natalia's age and behavior posed a significant threat to their family, leading them to make the difficult choice to sever ties. Barnetts left her. The Barnetts maintained that when they first adopted Natalia, they were under the belief that she was a young child. Their primary motivation was to provide her with a loving home and a better life. At the time of the adoption, the Barnetts were led to believe Natalia was 6 years old, and they welcomed her into their family with the intention of giving her a future full of opportunities. However, the Barnetts' side of the story took a dramatic turn as they began to notice concerning signs that suggested Natalia was far older than they had been told. As time passed, the Barnetts reported increasingly unsettling behavior from Natalia. They described her as exhibiting violent tendencies, including making threats of physical harm toward them. In some instances, she allegedly expressed a desire to hurt them or cause damage to their property. The Barnetts also claimed that Natalia's behavior was manipulative and deceptive, further fueling their belief that she was not a child, but an adult. They stated that she demonstrated a level of emotional and intellectual sophistication that seemed out of place for a supposed 6-year-old. One of the most significant aspects of the Barnetts' allegations was their claim that Natalia was not, in fact, a child at all. They believed that she had been deliberately posing as a younger girl in order to deceive them. This theory was supported by their discovery that Natalia had a medical condition that caused her physical appearance to resemble that of a child, even though she was much older. This condition, which is linked to her rare form of dwarfism, may have made her look younger than her actual age and helped her convincingly pass as a young child at the time of the adoption. Over time, the Barnetts claimed that the situation became increasingly untenable. They asserted that Natalia's behavior became more erratic and disturbing, leading them to feel unsafe in their own home. The Barnetts described their decision to leave Natalia behind as a difficult and painful one. They believed that they had done everything they could to care for her. But after consulting with professionals and realizing the severity of the situation, they felt they could no longer provide the care that was needed. Ultimately, they moved out of their family home and left Natalia to fend for herself, assuming she was an adult capable of independent living. The Barnetts argued that they had been victims of deception and manipulation, asserting that Natalia had tricked them into adopting her under false pretenses. Their claims sparked public controversy, as they argued that Natalia's age and behavior posed a significant threat to their family, leading them to make the difficult choice to sever ties. The age controversy. The age controversy surrounding Natalia Grace remains one of the most perplexing aspects of her case. When the Barnetts initially adopted her, they were told she was 6 years old. However, as time passed, doubts began to arise about her true age. Medical experts soon began questioning the accuracy of her age, suggesting that Natalia was not a child at all but instead a much older woman who had somehow convinced the Barnetts of her youth. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence was a bone scan, which revealed that her skeletal age was far older than 6 years old, suggesting she was likely an adult. This discovery led some to believe that Natalia had been posing as a child, using her medical condition to mislead the Barnetts into adopting her. Despite the bone scan and other medical assessments, the Barnetts' claims have been met with skepticism. Some critics argue that the Barnetts might have misunderstood the situation or even exploited the ambiguity around Natalia's age for their own purposes. The idea that they may have adopted an adult, albeit one with a physical condition that made her appear younger, raises complex questions about the adoption process itself. Were they fully aware of the possibility that they were adopting an adult rather than a child? And if they truly believed that Natalia was an adult, why did they initially bring her into their home in the first place? Moreover, the decision to abandon Natalia after they discovered her true age has sparked serious ethical concerns. Critics question whether the Barnetts acted responsibly in leaving her to fend for herself. Many argue that regardless of her true age, Natalia was still a vulnerable individual, and the Barnetts had a duty to ensure her well-being. The entire situation has raised difficult questions about the responsibilities of adoptive parents and the moral implications of abandoning a child or adult under such circumstances. The legal fallout. The legal fallout from the Natalia Grace case took a dramatic turn when, in 2019, the Barnetts were charged with neglect. Authorities discovered that after they had moved to Canada, Natalia was left behind in an apartment in Lafayette, Indiana, with no apparent support system. The Barnetts were accused of abandoning her in unsafe conditions, effectively leaving her to fend for herself. This discovery led to a full investigation, and the case quickly gained widespread media attention, stirring debates about the ethics of the Barnetts' actions. The central question in the legal proceedings has been whether the Barnetts were justified in abandoning Natalia or whether they had simply made a tragic, perhaps reckless mistake. Some believe that the Barnetts genuinely feared for their safety and that of their family due to Natalia's behavior. They maintain that they were misled by a fraudulent adoption and that their decision to leave her behind was, in their view, the only option. In contrast, many critics argue that, regardless of Natalia's true age or condition, abandoning her in an apartment with no support was an unethical and irresponsible action, particularly if she was indeed a vulnerable adult. The legal battle is ongoing, and the complexity of the situation only seems to deepen as more details emerge. The Barnetts' claim of being victims of deception has not been universally accepted, and many people wonder if there were deeper layers to Natalia's story that remain hidden. Were the Barnetts truly duped by a cunning deception, or did they overlook their responsibilities as adoptive parents? the case raises difficult questions about moral duty, the ethics of adoption, and the limits of parental responsibility. Psychological aspects of the case. The psychological aspects of the Natalia Grace case are complex and multifaceted, particularly if Natalia was indeed an adult woman posing as a child. If this were the case, it would raise significant questions about her mental health, behavior, and motivations. Some experts suggest that Natalia might have had a psychological condition that led her to perceive herself as a child, or perhaps she was attempting to manipulate her adoptive parents by using her perceived age as a means of control. If she was aware of her true age, her actions could be seen as an effort to gain sympathy or secure a stable home by manipulating the Barnetts into believing they were caring for a vulnerable young girl. In this scenario, Natalia's behavior could be tied to deeper psychological issues, such as a desire for affection, belonging, or protection from a world that she perceived as threatening or unstable. On the other hand, some argue that Natalia may not have had full control over her actions, especially if she experienced psychological trauma stemming from her medical condition or early life experiences in Ukraine. There is the possibility that her dwarfism, combined with her unique developmental situation, led to confusion about her own identity and age. If Natalia was genuinely confused about her age or had difficulty understanding the reality of her condition, it would add another layer of complexity to the situation, complicating the ability to assess her behavior from a purely rational perspective. At the same time, the psychological impact on Natalia of being abandoned by her adoptive parents is undeniable. Whether she was a child or an adult, being left behind in an apartment without support would have been traumatic. The emotional toll of such an experience could lead to deep feelings of betrayal, loneliness, and confusion, all of which would have lasting consequences on her mental health. Regardless of her true age, the psychological scars from being abandoned by the Barnetts cannot be underestimated. Media coverage. The Natalia Grace case has attracted widespread media attention, sparking intense public debate. News outlets, documentaries, and online discussions have all contributed to shaping the narrative surrounding the events. As new information has emerged, the case has become a focal point for outrage and concern across the globe, with many grappling with the conflicting stories presented by the Barnetts and Natalia's supporters. Whether one believes the Barnetts' claims of deception or sees Natalia as the victim, the case has undeniably raised questions about trust, ethics, and responsibility in adoption. Criticism of the media's coverage has been fierce, with many accusing news outlets of sensationalizing the story. Some argue that the focus on scandalous details and dramatic elements has overshadowed the more serious issues at play, such as the complexities of adopting a child with special needs, the potential psychological factors involved, and the broader implications for child welfare. This type of coverage can contribute to public misconceptions, leading people to form opinions based on incomplete or biased portrayals of the events. On the other hand, others believe that the media coverage has helped bring attention to important topics such as the difficulties of adoption, mental health issues, and the challenges faced by families who adopt children with special needs. The case has highlighted how important it is to thoroughly assess the backgrounds and needs of children being adopted, particularly when there are medical or psychological factors at play. Regardless of the stance taken, it's clear that the Natalia Grace case has left a lasting impact on the public's understanding of adoption and family dynamics. It's a deeply troubling situation that raises more questions than answers, and it will likely continue to generate discussion for years to come. The Natalia Grace case is a tragic and disturbing example of how a series of miscommunications, lies, and questionable decisions can lead to a whirlwind of legal, emotional, and ethical consequences. As we've explored, there are still many unanswered questions about Natalia's true age, the Barnetts' actions, and the overall handling of the situation. While the case continues to unfold, it raises larger questions about the adoption process, how we handle complex medical conditions, and the ethics of abandonment. The story of Natalia Grace is far from over, and it will likely continue to spark debates for years to come. If you found this video insightful, make sure to like, comment, and share your thoughts on this troubling case. Don't forget to subscribe for more content on the most intriguing and thought-provoking cases. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to light. Thanks for watching.